So, immigration. Let me tell you, this is a good news story in what has been a pretty bad news story in the last few months. Immigration reform is going to happen in this country one way or the other this year. Now, everyone wants to have immigration reform. That's the good news. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, though, only want to go so far. They want to create kind of an apartheid situation where we'll let everyone stay here who may be here illegally. We'll give them a green card. They can work here, but they're never going to have a pathway to citizenship here. And I don't support that. Sorry.
Okay.
And I don't think that most of America supports that. So what will happen is we'll either resolve that one way or the other, or we're going to have the president do some things by executive order. And one of the things he can do by executive order for those persons who are family members of US citizens who are here illegally. There's about 4 million of them. So you have a legal citizen, and then you've got family members who are illegal. There's a way by which he can, by executive order, guarantee that they can stay here. So we no longer split families apart. Now, let me say this. I think it's very important that we make a statement. This is not amnesty. Persons who have come here without the legal documentation should be required to do a number of things. They should pay a fine. They should learn English. They should not have any kind of offense or record on file. And they should go to the back of the line. Because a lot of people have played by the rules, have been waiting in their countries for the opportunity to come here. And some of these are long lines. And they should come before those who have come here illegally. So that's my position on immigration reform. Okay, so let's open it up to questions you may have.
So we have... So we have quite a few questions on violence and gun control, so we'll start with those. What are your thoughts on violence in East Palo Alto? What do you plan to do to ensure the safety of those of us who live here?
Okay, I've had a conversation with the police chief. He's educated me on the issues around violence here in East Palo Alto and really the existence of the gangs that are really creating a great deal of havoc. The number of murders in East Palo Alto has declined substantially to, I believe the number is 7 as of last year. Is that correct, Ruben? From a high of 44 at one point in time. So the murders are down. But that's not good enough. Next week, and I believe there is going to be a gun buyback in East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Palo Alto, in which they're going to be offering $100, $200, and $300, depending on what type of gun it is. So those will be helpful. We did a gun buyback. I funded a gun buyback a few weeks ago. We had it at the county fairgrounds. I had no idea what was going to happen. I put $25,000 up. The sheriff added some money. We had some contributions from community leaders. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, people were already lining up. It was a 2-hour wait from 10 to 2 to turn over guns. We collected over 684 guns, 24 assault rifles, 100-round capacity magazines, silencers, and 1 street sweeper. Now a street sweeper is a 100-round capacity drum, the bullets of which are about that big, but there are bullets inside the bullet. So when you shoot it, it sprays bullets. Now, let me tell you why I was so stunned by this. I was stunned by it because San Mateo County has the 2nd lowest crime rate in the state. And we got 684 guns and 24 assault weapons. So, in terms of what we can do here in East Palo Alto, you know, the community is the recipient of a lot of resources. I think we all need to put our heads together and find out, are the resources being used the most effectively in terms of reducing gun violence? And what are the things we should, let me tell you, in the end, the best way to stop the bullets from being shot is to get people jobs. And so I think a concerted effort in this community to help people get employed will be a step in the right direction.
How will current proposed gun legislation curb gun violence in any way? By definition, criminals will continue breaking the laws, and citizens' rights will be infringed upon.
So, the reason that we need a nationwide policy is because it's hard to really evaluate the effects of laws that require universal background checks or mental health programs that are instituted in the communities if you don't have it nationwide, because guns filter in from so many different places. I'm firmly convinced that if we have sane laws on the books that guarantee you can keep your guns as law-abiding citizens, but we can restrict the guns that get into criminal hands, we're going to be a safer country. And that's why you've got to scrutinize the dealers. That's why you've got to get rid of the loopholes that allow for gun shows to sell guns to people regardless of what their status is. Why you need a universal background check. Why you need to do research. Why you need to be able to trace guns. One of the things we're going to do on April 29th here in San Mateo County is a whole gun violence prevention summit around mental health, and see what other steps we can make in that regard. I have a goddaughter who's been teaching kindergarten through 3rd grade now for about 15 years. And she said to me recently, any teacher who knows her stuff can identify kids who are going to get in trouble between kindergarten and 3rd grade. Kids don't come out of the womb as felons. When we are among the 23 wealthiest countries in the world, responsible for 80% of the gun deaths, something's wrong. And our kids deserve better. Next question.
I'm merging a few of these together. What is your view on banning assault weapons and regulating private licensed gun sellers?
So I support the assault weapon ban. I actually carried the legislation on the assembly floor back in 1989 when we put the assault weapon ban in place here in California. And there was kind of an interesting exchange. I was carrying the bill on behalf of David Roberti, Senator David Roberti, and I was introducing the bill, and one of my colleagues stood up and said, "Ms. Speier, can I ask you a question?" I said, "I yield." "Ms. Speier, have you ever shot an assault weapon?" He said it again. "Ms. Speier, have you ever shot an assault weapon?" And I thought to myself, if you are so stupid to ask me this question, I'm going to give it right back to you. And I said, "No, Assembly member, I have not. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever been shot by an assault weapon?" So he sat down. The bill passed out of the assembly, and then Republican Governor George Deukmejian signed it into law. So we've had an assault weapon ban here in California since 1989. In terms of, what was the second question, universal? Oh.
Regulating private licensed gun sellers.
Yes, private gun sellers. Yeah, I think universal background checks should mean universal background checks. And we basically have that here in California. Now, we can't say that people don't violate it. But if you're selling a gun from private gun sales, you're supposed to go through a gun dealer to sell that gun. Just like when you sell your car, you're supposed to go to the DMV. Same thing.
Shifting gears. How do you plan to combat the childhood obesity rate in East Palo Alto? Reports show that 42% of local fifth graders are overweight or obese.
Wow. I didn't know that. And that's part of what having a town hall is all about. I can learn more about the community and see what we can do about it. Well, we should do something, obviously, more than we're doing. I think what the best thing for me to do is spend some time with the community leaders, with the school district, and find out what strategies are important to employ. I think, you know, a lot of it's real simple though. A lot of it is, you know, stop eating fast food, exercise, and exercise. But nonetheless, I mean, the spike in childhood diabetes is extraordinary. Dave, I don't know if you would like to say anything from an emergency room perspective. Do you encounter that at all? Or Dr. Schuler?
Well, we see it. We see it in epidemic proportions now. I mean, you didn't, 10 years ago it was significantly less than it is now. Now it's so common that it almost, unfortunately, can be almost overlooked because you see it so very often. I don't have statistics. The numbers are pretty dramatic where you're talking about children not just overweight, but in the obese category, and that just keeps compounding itself to our young adults. You're seeing people in their 20s and 30s having diseases, complications from diabetes that you did not see until people were in their 60s and 70s. Generation.
Actually, Jackie, the Endocrine Society describes obesity and fatty liver disease.
They can't hear you without you speaking in the microphone, too.
The Endocrine Society describes fatty liver disease in children and diabetes as a tsunami.
Okay, when East Palo Alto was just being incorporated, there was still an issue about local grocery stores. Are there local grocery stores here in the community? There still are. Yeah. There are.
Not major grocery stores.
Not major?
Small scale.
There's one.
Yeah. It's not like a safe one.
All right. I think what we'll do is we'll have a roundtable discussion with city leaders and see what we can do and how we can make federal dollars available. As little as they are right now. I didn't talk to you about the debt limit and the debt in general and the sequestration, but we should probably get to that before we close down. Okay, next question.
What are your thoughts about improving the quality of schools in California?
Improving the quality of schools in California. As you know, I'm not a state legislator anymore. I am now on the federal level. And in terms of the state, it's all about revenue. California still ranks, I'm certain, 50th, Maria, is that right? 50th in the nation in per pupil expenditures. It relates to the fact that we have Prop 13 in place. Prop 13 is never going to go away. Most school districts find ways to generate local revenues by passing local parcel taxes and countywide efforts. The one thing that we can do, and this date relates more to mental health. You know, these kids that have taken it upon themselves to become mass murderers did not get the resources they needed when they were young in terms of mental health. And I don't know what the status is of mental health services in San Mateo County right now, but as part of that April 29th event, we're going to find out what the resources are. And the county has just passed, or I shouldn't say the county, the voters in San Mateo County have just passed a proposition that will generate, I think, Warren explained to me, it's about $60 million a year for additional services in the county. And the county will be looking at whether or not some of those dollars should go to services around mental health in the schools.
Do you support an amendment to the U.S. Constitution taking away corporate personhood?
Yes, I do. Does everyone understand what corporate personhood is? The Citizens United decision basically declared that a corporation has the same rights as a person, so they should be able to make contributions. And the combination of that and a number of other things have created a oligarchy in this country, to be quite frank, where a very small group of people is going to be running things because they can very surreptitiously spend a lot of money on campaigns for specific candidates, and the results are not transparent, and you don't know where the money's coming from, but it's coming from a small group of folks who want certain things. You know, when I was in the state legislature, we didn't have campaign limits. And I always used to, and I was one of those that believed we needed campaign limits. And I used to tell folks, you know, of course, anyone can give me a $100,000 check and not expect anything from me, right? Now, who believes that?
Would you include unions in this?
Yes.
Include unions in,
And the corporate personhood?
well, they're not corporate.
No, I'm asking though. It's a conglomerate of people represented by a legal entity for their interests.
So PACs exist. Companies can continue to have PACs, and PACs identify the dollars, and those dollars, when they are contributed, are identified. They're not through this corporate personhood.
Okay, so the unions, I'm just, you know, I'm not being
Sure.
contentious. I just want to know where you stand. So unions could spend with impunity, or corporations could not.
No, corporations still do through their PACs.
No, in this amendment process that we've
A corporation is not a person.
Or is it a union?
But a union doesn't make the contributions. The PACs make the
Okay,
union.
so would union PACs be subject to the same limit?
I guess we're not, maybe I'm not explaining
We're talking
myself.
past each other. Okay. The question was, is there a, would you support a?
The question was regarding supporting an amendment to the Constitution on corporate personhood.
Okay. Then you said about Citizens United being
Right.
corporations spending too much money in politics.
Well, it's corporations, it's individuals
Okay.
that are not transparent.
Okay. Is your opposition to Citizens United, does that apply to unions as well? Spending money in politics?
No, the issue with Citizens United is really the lack of transparency,
Okay.
and the fact that you can have a corporation now make contributions to a not-for-profit, and the not-for-profit can spend the money and not have any kind of ability to know where the money comes from. It's really being able to trace the money. Corporations do have PACs. Unions have PACs. Corporations have individuals who contribute to those PACs, and unions have individuals that contribute to their PACs. So they're on an equal playing field, you could argue, right now in terms of PACs. If you're asking, would I like to get rid of PACs altogether? Yeah, I'd like to go to public financing of campaigns. I always like to remind people that, you know, your insurance premium that you pay, fold it into your insurance, your auto insurance premium, your homeowner's insurance premium, is part of that is money that's going to be spent by the company to lobby on behalf of their interests and not yours.
Well, the same thing with unions. Unions
I'm
do.
saying, that's why I would go to total public financing of campaigns.
There will be an open mic opportunity in just a moment.
Sorry.
What is your position on Glass-Steagall?
My position on Glass-Steagall, for those of you that do not know what Glass-Steagall is, that was the law that was created after the Wall Street meltdown in 1929. And as a result of that particular trauma that created the Great Depression, Glass-Steagall was passed, which said that banks and other financial institutions, insurance companies, and surety companies, securities firms, all had to be separate. There had to be a wall between them. In 1999, I should say, in 1999, the Congress decided to pass a law and repeal Glass-Steagall. Now, they didn't do that on their own. All of those industries were chomping at the bit for a long time, asking Congress to repeal Glass-Steagall because they said, this is a financial global marketplace now. You've got to give us the opportunity to own each other and work in the financial marketplaces that are global because we'll be at a disadvantage. 1999, passed by the Congress, signed into law by President Clinton. Within 7 years, we endured the greatest financial meltdown since the Great Depression. So it's no coincidence that by taking that particular law and allowing for them to be joined at the hips, and then a number of other laws. One of my favorite stories is about a woman who was a Stanford Law School grad. She was the editor of the Stanford Law Review. Her name is Brooksley Bourne. She went to work for a law firm in Washington, D.C., knew everything there was to know about derivatives. She gets appointed by President Clinton to become the chair of the Commodities Future Trading Commission. She gets there and she looks at what's going on. She thinks, oh my gosh, we got to do something about derivatives. Well, at the time, President Clinton had Larry Summers and Arthur Levitt and Alan Greenspan, all of whom said, are you kidding? In short order, she was removed. And there was a law passed in Congress to say that Congress was prohibiting itself from regulating derivatives. That was 2001, 2002. Then there was another law that went into effect that basically said that there was not a fiduciary duty owed by your stockbroker to you. And then there was an administrative rule that was passed that lifted the leverage. So you couldn't be leveraged more than 15 to 1. All of a sudden they lifted the cap. So all these companies that went belly up, the Bear Stearns, the Lehman Brothers, were leveraged 40 to 1. So that's why all of that happened. It's all our fault. It's Congress's fault.
How many congressmen are on board? Just quick.
How many Congress members are there?
On board of Glass-Steagall? Because you know it is a good thing.
Oh, how many have, I'm not sure how many have.
Thank you.
All right, next question.
East Palo Alto has the highest rate of homelessness in San Mateo County. What are your plans, or what can you do to address this challenge for our underserved community?
So I would think that that's an issue that could be addressed by the County Board of Supervisors, and maybe Warren, after hearing that, you'll take it back to the board and look at the issue around homelessness. It's really a local issue and not a federal issue.
What steps is Congress taking to protect civil liberties in respect to drones?
In respect to drones, good question. There is there's really a dearth of activity around that right now because it's happened over a very short period of time that it's been used internationally, and now it's being used domestically. And there's a front page story in the New York Times today about when it's appropriate domestically. And I think we've got to really be very circumspect about how we use drones. As you can tell, I'm a big privacy advocate, and I don't want any drone coming into my backyard, and I'm sure you don't either. And I think you've got to use it much like you use the search warrant. It has to be reviewed in order to use a drone by law enforcement. There can be some purposes to use it domestically, but it's got to be narrowly drafted and it's got to be subject to a court procedure.
Why is it that so many of our jobs are being moved overseas, and what can be done to stop this?
So the good news is that there's insourcing of jobs now. Believe it or not, 600,000 jobs have been insourced in the last 4 years. President made a point during his State of the Union address this week to point to Apple, which has now decided to start manufacturing the Macs here in the United States. How many of you have iPhones? Raise your hands. How many of you have iPhones? How many of you have other phones? Okay, other types of phones. Okay, I won't own an iPhone for that reason. Because the iPhone is manufactured in China with parts coming from Korea, Japan, Germany, and the amount of revenue that comes that is generated from the iPhone that is here in the United States is something like 18%. And I've been told that the iPhone could be manufactured in the United States, keep the same price point, and only reduce, or you could either increase the price point by $60 and manufacture it totally in the United States, or you could reduce the profit margin by a smaller amount and still have it. Now, I'm not going to get into trying to run Apple, but I do think that the fact that they made the commitment to manufacture the Macs here in the United States is a very good sign. And I think what's also happening, China has woke up. And the workers in China are going to demand higher wages, and that's a good thing. The transportation costs are really very high. So it's a dollar and cents decision that's being made by companies. General Electric now is going to actually manufacture the washers and dryers back in the United States. I do a campaign effort every year about making it in America. And at the fairgrounds, we highlight one weekend a number of companies regionally that are making things and manufacturing them in the United States. Well, not just in the United States, in the region. And it's a great event, so if you come to the fairgrounds during the fair next summer, one of those weekends. Do we know what weekend it's going to be?
It'll be the second weekend of
the second weekend, we're going to do our Make It in America effort. So it's really worth each of us, when we're consuming, to look at the opportunity to buy American. When I go to Home Depot, I look for any of those labels. And I encourage you to do the same thing.
I'm concerned about the levees in East Palo Alto. What can be done to speed along the fixing of the levees?
So we started working on this issue January 1st. And there is an effort underway. Brian, why don't you speak to what we've done so far in terms of the levees?
Well, our role is to make sure that the federal regulatory process assists the city rather than prevents the city from getting its job done. And in fact, the Army Corps of Engineers has been on top of it and has offered the city advice. And I'm not even sure yet if the construction has started, but if it hasn't, it's supposed to start soon. And the project is going to go forward. It turned out to be more complicated, I think, than people had realized at first. And so it's a bigger project than they'd first been expected. But the Army Corps is there and is moving all of the permits through at lightning speed. They basically just take the paperwork, process it very quickly, and turn it back to the city.
Let me give you some unsolicited advice, though. For those of you that don't want to have flood insurance because you don't want that extra expense, and especially those of you who are not in a floodplain and therefore don't have to carry flood insurance, you might rethink it. Because in those recent storms that we've had, those December storms, my living room got totally flooded. And it looks like a meth house right now in our home because all the carpet's up. And when you find out how inexpensive flood insurance is, and the fact that climate change is changing our weather patterns, these 100-year storms are not 100-year storms. They're happening every 5 or 6 years. So if you have a particular proclivity to water in your home, you might want to look at the flood insurance.